Yeah, she couldn't open the door.
Sorry, you can conversation.
That's what you do when you get put out of the hole. You leading? You leading? Good morning to the next instalment of the long-term plan workshops. Thank you to all of those that are joining us today, and look forward to entertaining with some great ideas and great thoughts from both our council staff. So thank you, council staff, being here to support us, and the councillors giving up their time to be at this workshop. I'm going to hand over to Steve to get the ball rolling today. So over to you, Mr. Giblin.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Basher. So today what we're going to run through is give you a bit of an update on Taumata Arawai and the meeting that we had earlier in the week. We're also going to give you, and I circulated this last night, have a reasonably long and thoughtful discussion around the advice that we've received from DIA in regards to the implications of the water reform and the direction that we received yesterday from the DepSec from DIA, Michael Lovett. There's some really significant drivers in that announcement around the water reform and the package that this new government is driving. And so I want to be able to brief you and have a discussion with you around there are a range of options, and there will be no decisions today, but we want to get from you a sense of where do you feel more comfortable with in terms of process. And we've got a whiteboard behind us that between John and I, we will track some of your feedback, whether or not we stay with the plan, or the alternative is whether or not we defer for 12 months. And, you know, bearing in mind that the team have only received this level of information in the last 24 hours, we're digesting it and debating it ourselves, and we aren't of any clear view at this stage, but I guess the timing of this conversation is material to what we're trying to do. The team will just give you a bit of a run through on any updates around the borrowings and our rates, and we'll talk to the financial strategy, which was circulated earlier. Michael then, with Mel, run through an overview of the infrastructure strategy, and Lynn will follow up with the policies overview, and then the GMs will just give you an overview of where our KPIs are at. Obviously, the first half of the meeting is going to be quite critical because we want you to be thinking about those options as it relates to all of the policies and strategies that we're presenting today, because it will influence the way in which we approach the options at a later council meeting. So yeah, I'll pass over to John now to give us a quick overview of where we're at and get the session underway.
Thanks, Steve. So like I have done over the last few months, I've kind of outlined what our timeline is in terms of at present, you know, before any decisions taken. So it's no changes to this really. I think it's quite clear as it's on the screen, and I think it's what it is at present. We're still following the same process. We have caught up with our audit team at EY. We spoke to them last week. We're speaking to them next Monday as well, just to give them an update on what's come out from that ROI. This Mike's going to take you through in a couple of minutes. So yeah, like I say, this is just based on what we've got at present. The document, just so everyone is in the loop, is around, we would say we're about 80% here, which is great. And we will discuss obviously all the things that are on the screen today, pending any conversation we have later on based on the updated legislation that came out last night. So I'll move on to Mike, and he can give us an update on the Taumata ROI meeting that we had, or the last couple of meetings we've had with them over the last week or two. Thanks.
Many thanks, John, and everybody. So this is timely, and the reason we want to talk about it as part of this morning is that it is material to the LTP, at least that's the sense of it. And just to recap before I give you the update, Taumata Arawai, our regulator, we know that whilst new government is repealing some legislation. They are not repealing the legislation relating to the regulator or the Water Services Act. So if you like, compliance is still compliance, that's not changing. And to that effect, we in Bulla have 3 water supplies that the regulator has tagged as essentially our non-treated supplies in Northern Bulla, and specifically they are Little Wanganui, Mokanui and Mamandarai. So we received letters of expectations from the regulator last year, and through our CEO we responded to those letters, which culminated in a meeting in last month, and then a subsequent meeting just on Monday of this week. And it's the outcome of that meeting that I'd like to just update here today. So in attendance were some high-level members of the regulator, including the regulator manager with respect to compliance, as well as our Chief Executive, CFO, myself and other staff members. Now, the purpose of the meeting was particularly to explore what's called a enforceable undertaking. So that's a statutory mechanism under the Water Services Act that allows water suppliers such as us to commit to a plan towards compliance, and these are serious commitments to make. And our purpose of the meeting was to try and get a better understanding of the implications of that process. But I would say at the beginning, the meeting was also about understanding our roles and responsibilities. So we as council acknowledge, as a current water supplier, we have duties to fulfil, and that's our starting point and our commitment. The regulator reminded us that they have powers available to them to enforce compliance, and I thought that was a good exchange of setting the scene, and we know who's got to do what. So I think that was quite good to confirm. We're the water supplier, we have legislation around compliance, and the regulator will use means available to them to fulfil that. So the inquiries from staff were around specifically what's required of the enforceable undertaking, what information needs to be prepared, how long do we have to prepare it, and I would say generally the advice from the regulator is to review the information they have online. There wasn't a lot of specifics provided, and you know, it showed us as staff that we've got some more homework to do to figure that out and actually decide whether we have the prerequisites to even go down the path of an enforceable undertaking. For example, you need to have a funding plan in order to make that application. So the onus is on the water supplier to apply for what's called an EU, enforceable undertaking. It's the discretion of the regulator whether they accept that application and proceed on that course. And if you like, it's a different pathway to not doing anything and being prosecuted. So it's a bit of a compromise between, okay, you can't do what's needed now. However, if you commit to a plan and it's demonstrably achievable, including how you would fund it, then that provides the pathway to avoid a different outcome for council. So I would say though that we weren't, I didn't feel that staff left with a very clear understanding. We have more work to do there. But probably the most significant takeaway from that meeting on Monday was about their expectations now. So the regulators' expectations right now are that for those particular water supplies that are untreated, they need to see activity towards at least residual disinfectant. So whilst that feels like a jump to a conclusion because we're actually exploring all sorts of other alternatives, the reality is the regulator expects us to chlorinate those 3 supplies ASAP. And actually, whilst it wasn't said, I would read that as a prerequisite for even an enforceable undertaking. So even before we put together a plan that says this is how we will achieve compliance in the long term, they're already suggesting to us that if something like that doesn't happen straight away, we're not demonstrating risk management of the highest risks that they perceive, which is that material contamination of water supplies. So that's another thing where staff have to now contemplate is how do we react to it's a pretty strong signal from the regulator that you must do something right now or else. So we've got to figure that out in terms of the LTP because actually we haven't contemplated anything like that. We've taken more of a, we have to find a path before we can bring something to council. So we're just, to give a sense of the level of uncertainty now, we're having to even come back to first principles about what do we need to include in this LTP to even, you know, move forward and avoid possibly well, the powers available to the regulator.
Have you got a ballpark figure for what would be the cost of the chlorination?
So at the moment, we're not even sure whether for those particular supplies chlorination would work technically because they're untreated supplies, there's no filtration, there's no anything. But if it was plausible, it's still significant figures. I'm loath to provide one, but it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, we could look at our recent experience. We've just chlorinated Reefton relatively recently. We're looking to chlorinate Burnakaiki as well. But they're different because they've already got treatment. But it's definitely not a small investment.
Yeah, Rosalie.
So it has been legislated that we have to chlorinate then, because I thought it was sort of in that advance that chlorination legislation hasn't come through officially. So has that been passed through legislation that we have to chlorinate?
Yeah.
And when did that happen?
So the phrasing is residual disinfectant in the Water Services Act, unless you get exemption. So you can apply for exemption, and that's the path that some have taken. And there's a process for that, and it would require essentially the chief executive would turn up otherwise to approve it. But here we are on Monday receiving a very direct message to say our suggestion to you is that you chlorinate those supplies, because if there's an event, if there was an event, you've not demonstrated the most, you've not demonstrated the fastest mitigation to the risk that's been identified.
Joe.
So I don't think the regulation allows the treatment at the household with household filters, but would something like that demonstrate that you're doing something in the interim because the other terms just doesn't stick up affordability wise.
So I think the point here is we've got a lot of work to do to figure out how do we respond to even the immediate indication or signal from the regulator, and we can take that as they're not going to let us do nothing.
Tony.
I suppose I'm not trying to speak, but not really because I'm familiar with it. I think first protocol talking to people out there first, because they're the ones that are affected by it. So then explaining this and then see what they have to say. That might come with some option. You might be surprised that probably maybe only about 3 houses out there actually drink that water. And you think there's money into it, thinking that everyone's 100 on the list, which is, I can tell you right now, not 100 of them drink that water. So it's really a conversation first with people who live there and move from there. That's my opinion. Yeah.
I think one of the key risks going is what Mike said is that they've been quite clear with their expectations moving forward from a regulator point of view.
Yeah.
What they've also made clear to us is that there doesn't appear to be much time. They say if somebody does drink water up there and there becomes an outbreak of sickness, whatever it may be, then that unfortunately would be based on the risk that is currently there. So that they're very clear that risk is a daily risk, and I'm sure that Mike and his team will wake up every morning knowing that risk. And it's about how we now go from that to get to the next steps. Well, absolutely, I think we need delays with the I think that's a given. But I think what Mike's point is it was the expectations are clear.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, in response to that, as in conversation saying, people of Mokanui, can you not drink this water? Until we find a way through, how can we work around that until we find a pathway? If they're saying that we need to chlorinate that, we can't actually do it because there's big huge particles, like it's not even through a filter, it's just brown. And Doug's actually seen the water there. And so that's not a reality at all. Why don't we just stop use of the water until we find a solution? That solves that problem.
Well, no, I think we've got I got the feedback, I think, on that. We've got 3 suppliers up Northern Buller that we need to address.
Yeah.
The team will work on that, and I think we'll take your feedback on board around the need. And this is the benefit of sharing this now, is the need to get the community up to speed. We're going to talk a little bit later on about what is actually fit for purpose as well, because the Minister for DIA, Simone Brown, has also talked about the regulations do need to be fit for purpose. And so, again, we don't know what that means, to what degree that means there's change. So there's a lot of uncertainty. I think someone mentioned that the uncertainty in this is really high. So we are now working quite hard to understand the immediate steps and the process to buy into the next level of investment to get those water quality standards up to the regulator's standard.
So along those lines, staff can run off, spend a lot of time and cost in trying to develop what's going to be acceptable to the ministry or whatever the water regulator. And then as they go through, for the reasons that Tony has put forward, it's not fit for purpose because it's unnecessary. So, you know, we can go off on a tangent in one area because we feel as though we've been directed to at a cost that may be unwarranted.
That's noted.
Yeah.
Really.
I think in the end, what you're saying is that they've said you've got no choice. You've got to do something, because the cost of doing something is not only perception, but also the risk to the council. It's not the risk of those people drinking it. Well, probably is the risk of them drinking it, but it's the risk to the council and the cost to the council if something does happen. And they're saying they're not willing for councils to have that risk.
If I may, so subject to the rest of the LTP discussions, the 4 main lanes or options that we could consider here, and with some direction, staff can go away and prepare the information and perhaps bring it back to council. 4 options apparent to us at the moment is to do nothing, literally stay where we are, and we'll need some pros and cons and implications back to council to understand what that could mean. The next one is to do that immediate response, essentially that triage to chlorinate the supplies, to at least show the regulator that we're listening and we're taking the strong signals. The third one is to commit to an enforceable undertaking, which is that statutory mechanism under the Water Services Act. And I would almost certainly say that in order to do that, you must have done the second one. So I don't think the regulator will consider an enforceable undertaking pathway unless we've already demonstrated commitment by way of that chlorination of the supplies. But that's what I think. And then the fourth lane would be to do everything as asked, as soon as possible. You know, with money as yet determined, funding uncertain, you know, so if they're the 4 lanes and you want to immediately discount 1 and 4, you know, the risk profile probably sits somewhere in the middle, but again, this would be something staff will take guidance from council, whether a format like that brought back to council with options such as that presented, laid out in terms of, you know, risk, pros, cons, disadvantages, advantages, and seek a direction. That may be worth considering.
Tony?
Question, so obviously you just told us that you can't chlorinate Mokanui, so you probably can't chlorinate little Wonga either. Could you chlorinate one?
No.
No. So you can't really, well, that's not really giving much of a choice, is it? Because you can't do it, can you?
Yes, so our work would be to, I believe our work would be to demonstrate to the regulator we've heard what they've suggested.
Yep.
To do the homework to show whether it can and can't be done. And if it can't be done, what are the other alternatives we could suggest? Because again, we're looking for what they, generically call acceptable solutions. And to them, acceptable has got a certain description. To us, it means more than just compliance acceptable. We've got to look at our ratepayer affordability. The matter of consultation under the Local Government Act is critical. And in many ways, we're stuck between legislation here. On one hand, we've got a regulator with all the legislation and powers. And on the other hand, as local government, we're under the Local Government Act with our own duties and obligations. And at the moment, possibly like some other matters we'll get to today, it's just an uncomfortable position to be in because the walls are just coming in all around us, and it's a bit like, well, which bad do you want? Unfortunately, whilst I would say primarily public health is the risk that truly matters in my view.
Yes, Grant.
Thanks. I think, as Tony alluded to, that with if these supplies cannot be chlorinated as they are, why not just move onto the filtration side of things and get them so that shows these guys that we are actually doing something, ready to get chlorination perhaps down the road when they come up with the money, not when we come up with the money.
Yeah, through the chair, I think that's the homework required to start now, is to prove all of that. So that the regulator understands as well as we do what the challenges are and actually be proactive with alternatives. Because again, if we can get their agreement, we're at that base.
Right, Tony.
So can you just, maybe after this too, can you just come back to us with a pathway? Can you just show us the actual pathway so we can have a look at that, see where that pathway sits?
Well, how far down are we on that pathway? You've had somebody working on these water supplies for probably 3 months now, so it's not as though you're going to start tomorrow. You've actually already started. So how far into them are we as to gaining some of this information, as to filtration or capture of supply that then we can treat it in whatever way best, or whether individual households, which has been mooted so many times, so just individual household disinfectant would be suitable. Would that be suffice?
So through the chair, yes, absolutely. So for example, groundwater sources, so through the federal funding provision was made to commence drilling test bores to find alternative water sources, which whilst not necessarily getting away from residual disinfectant, for example, it may be technically possible to do it if you have different water quality to begin with, different raw water. So there is progress along that. What I would say though is that through discussions with the regulator now, it is a bit of a game changer where they're very much in, I couldn't say strongly enough the signal from their leadership that they see it very clearly. And whilst we are working on solutions all the way back to, for example, under the Local Government Act, could we transfer or close these schemes down, which there is a provision for, it's just at the moment the legislation is quite restrictive about how you would do that, and it's taken a lot of time, but that should be in the suite of options, is that, well, actually, to some of these suppliers, maybe it's better to have another way to do this. However, there's a lot of work in this, and it shouldn't be underestimated what's needed to be done to have a coherent strategy and plan that not only meets our council's expectations, but now a very interested regulator.
But how far down the track are we? That's why my question was.
Well, I would have said about 50% down the track until Monday, because now we really have to relook at this and say, you know, I wouldn't think for a minute that just chlorinating our 3 systems was high on our target range. But now the regulator's almost saying, we think that's what we should do.
But we can't chlorinate a system that we haven't got.
I mean, I think probably, you know, we need to move on. I mean, Annalise, you can have the last question, but I presume really we need to leave in your hands to do the work that's required to get the answers, because we haven't got the answers now. And it doesn't matter how many questions we ask, we aren't going to get the answers today, because obviously the ball's changed. Yeah. So Annalise, you can have the last one.
Yeah, so that's actually what I was going to ask, is if we could have a bit more information on how to not be a water supplier and go down that pathway and investigate that, because I think long term that's probably what's going to happen. And if the government were going to take on the 3 waters and have the entities, that's probably exactly what they would have done. It's just to say, here's a water tank, look after yourself. Yeah.
Well, go on, Joe.
I'd just like to back up what Tony said. While we don't have the answers at this stage, I think it's very important actually to talk to these communities and tell them what the challenges are, because I think it's their voice, it's their income, or what they're going to do to treat it. I think we should have an early conversation with them, say this is what we're facing. You know.
I'm sure that's part of the work they do. They will be doing. Can't do it at them. You've got to do it with them. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on.
Okay. Thanks. So the second leg of the trifecta of this conversation is going to be around the email that we circulated yesterday, and I appreciate that's a little bit fine. So I'm going to give you a quick summary of the key points. So the first bill will be enacted in Parliament on the 23rd, and that's the repeal of the waters reform. And there's a couple of really interesting direction of travel, and John will talk about what those legislative next steps are. But one of the biggest conversations that we want to connect you with today is the advice that came out yesterday around that first bullet point, number 1, which is an additional option which will enable councils to defer the long-term plan by 12 months. We understand that the driver for that is that part of the repeal package and the replacement regime is to leave the water assets and the entire ownership of the community through councils. And the critical challenge we've already discussed is the funding and affordability of that. And that was I guess that was why we were such an advocate of the water reform previously, because of the affordability challenges that we are noting and we're now seeing come through our draft LTP rates numbers. The key framework under point 2, which is around establishing a framework, which is to set up a sustainable water structure, which will be enabled within about 12 months, is one of the key drivers for the option to deferring the long-term plan, because that will enable us to both look at the entire and the in total size of the problem we're facing for our water infrastructure. It'll also critically enable us to get together with friends around the South Island to see if we can go in together. And this was, again, if you think about Entity I, which was a collection of the Canterbury and West Coast councils together, that was mandated. We're now dealing with a solution. I think the Mayor noted that in the paper yesterday. We're dealing with a solution that it's now not mandated. We've just got to go and sell our wares and pitch up to friends and to really start to put the case for Buller as to why you would partner with us. And as many of you will know, our case is not that compelling nor attractive. So we've got some work to do, and I think we're debating at the moment, to some degree, its impact on our long-term plan, and our thinking is, at the moment, our long-term plan, as John's noted, is about 80% done, ready for consultation. It's the draft plan to go out. That doesn't account for this new water regime at all. So we're now debating whether or not we should take either 2 to 3 months extra time to see what more information we can get and still adopt this year, or whether or not we take up the offer, which is going to be in the bill, we understand, around taking a 12-month deferral of the long-term plan and undertaking an enhanced annual plan. We don't have any detail as to exactly what that means. And if anything, more time will shed more light and give us more detail and give us more confidence. But we're signalling, and John will talk a little bit more about this, that's a question that this council is we would like you to have a chat about it today. We're not making any decisions, but we want to talk about it so that when we do bring a paper back for a formal resolution, we may then have a bit more information to sit behind it, but we'd love to hear you. John, hopefully I haven't taken too much of your steam.
I've done that. I think the layout of the land has changed dramatically in the past 24 to 48 hours for everyone sitting at this table in the country as a whole. You'll see I've highlighted what the Chief Executive of the DIA highlighted to us yesterday, or Mike Lovett highlighted to us as a council yesterday. But this morning at 10:15, I've received some further information from Tai Tuara, so I wanted to lay out what Raymond and the team over there have said. So they've said, in terms of the options it's given, so it's quite clear there's 3 options. The option is that we adopt in June 2024. We give a 1 to 3 month extension, so that's given us to the 30th of September. You can adopt any of those at any point in that 3 month period, but of course you can do the 12 months deferral with the enhanced annual plan. So what Tai Tuara have announced this morning, just based on what came out, I'll read this to you and then I'll send it out later on. So there is an additional flexibility for those councils who wish to take up and meet the criteria. Please stop me if you can't understand what I'm saying. Your council may elect to councils to defer their 2024-2034 long-term plan by 12 months and to prepare an enhanced annual plan, as we've said. If the council chooses this option, it will be required to include additional information, i.e. about the groups of activities and the capital expenditure in the 2024 to 25 annual plan, and to consult on that plan. So there will be a consultation period. Whilst we talk about timelines, and this is highlighted here, we've got quite a short space of time as a council to decide what we want to do next, because if we wish to exercise that option, it needs to be done by resolution of council by the 30th of April 2024, i.e. we'll have this month's council meeting next month in April, so we'll have to come back with a paper when you guys have your conversations, but there's not a long period of time to take. So there's a bit about the bill in terms of water services bylaws, but that's okay. But what it did say at the bottom is that the 2021 long-term plan will continue to have effect in those councils that take the 3 month extension or the 12 month deferral until such time as a 2024 long-term plan is adopted. That will also apply to any development contributions policies that were adopted in 2021. Obviously, we didn't have that at that time, so we couldn't put them in for this time round.
Grant.
Thanks, Chair. So, John, this repeal on the 23rd is actually not just the water supplies, it's actually stormwater and sewage as well.
Yeah.
So the whole lot's getting...
The whole of the Water Services Act, the Water Services Legislation Bill, the Economic and Regulation Bill, pretty much anything that's in relation to the water reform will be repealed. And I think that it was outlined yesterday, as you'll see in the middle bracket, the first bracket, that will be done probably by the end of next week, is what's been outlined to us. So what I've done, and Steve is absolutely right, I think we have to have a conversation about how, you know, I think it's important to get the debate going, certainly, for sure. But Douglas has highlighted a few things that I think is really important for us to think about as we move forward. So clearly the first thing we'll probably talk about today, I'm going to stop after each issue because I think it's important to talk about it, is around the establishment of new regional water entities, which has clearly been outlined in the Local Water Done Well policy, even the policy initially that came out last March. I.e. the question we need to have a think about, obviously there's no resolutions today, we'll come back and get that at council, but I think some guidance would be fantastic around, do we want to have a regional approach? What region should we support? I.e. should we go to Canterbury or should we potentially go to the whole of the South Island? And we need to think about the setup and the establishment of that, because obviously that will come with you know, quite a bit of time. That could take between 9 and 18 months as kind of current estimations. So I want to stop at that point because I think that there's a lot to take in, a lot to you know, divulge, and just ask any questions and put some time for debate around that element of the regional water things.
So,
Well, we know that the West Coast doesn't stack up, so that's not going to be a regional partnership, because it's doing no advantage. I can't see why Canterbury anyone would want to adopt us personally. It was quite a bit of opposition briefly orders about being part of the bigger body.
Joe, if you don't mind me saying, obviously I was involved quite heavily in terms of the National Transition Unit reform. That's why I was ultimately came here first. What I can say is there's a lot of councils, I'm not going to name names for obvious reasons, but there was a lot of councils in that over the hill that were quite keen on the approach as to how the DIA at the time wanted to do it. Similar to us, they were quite keen on the reform. So whilst Jamie and Steve have pointed out that, you know, that might not hold a compelling story, at that time when it was mandated, there was a lot of the councils and a lot of the area that were quite keen on it. So I wouldn't rule it out. Certainly, I certainly think we need to think about it. But like I say, it wasn't off the table for sure.
Tony.
I think there's going to be, you know, we are just one of many people talking about the exact same thing we're talking about now. And I hear what you're saying as far as Canterbury, for example, they because it has had all the infrastructure replaced. Why would they need to buddy up with something when they've got all the infrastructure? But obviously, like Don was saying too, you know, they through his experiences, you know, I think we need to use this. We need to roll with it and try and reach out and capture as many like-minded people as we can, because it's power in numbers. And we don't really have much, that's my opinion, I don't really have much option. What else are we going to do?
Yeah, and I think just in terms of options, through the chair that we've got, we can do nothing and look at it as build ourselves if we want to do that. We can go to our West Coast Regional Council, or the West Coast Council, sorry. We have had a report done back in 2020, Tonkin and Taylor done that for us, as I'm sure most of you will be aware, that the story around water is potentially not compelling, but the story about infrastructure in general, if we think about solid waste, you know, all infrastructure, I'm trying to round them off there. There could be roading, solid waste, water. If you combine it together and make one shared service, that shows more of a compelling story. What we need to remember is that when there was 4 entities, the whole of the South Island was pretty much an entity. So I think my view on it is, as a council, we can all collectively decide who we speak to, and we could speak to the whole of South Island if we want. That's a suggestion that's there. So it's something that's, you know, I think all cards are on the table for definite.
Cool.
So before, when you said some of Canterbury councils were interested in it originally,
yep.
Why? What would be the benefit?
I think they were interested in reform in general. I think there's a few councils that weren't. I think that I could probably name names, and I'm not going to do that for obvious reasons. But there's a lot of councils that you just have to look at the news articles just now, where some mayors are already coming out and saying, how are we going to work this moving forward? And that's not just across the hill, it could be down south, up in the North Island. We see the legislation already alludes to Auckland, so I think there's a lot of councils and a lot of mayors and chief executives and council elected members are probably sitting and having a conversation is very similar to what we are currently at present, based on what came out yesterday.
But what would you see in them benefiting with partnering up with the coast? What would they have seen out of it?
Douglas?
Well, I mean, personally, having had a bit of dirt on the county side, there's no financial benefit, one might argue, but just remember, everyone has their good days and their bad days. There will be a cycle. Just roughly some numbers, gut feel would be there's about 200 water connections, 200,000 water connections in the Canterbury area. The West Coast, we're talking water connections, not people, probably about 10,000. So that the percentage basis is not huge, so it's not that arguably it can be absorbed. But we have to remember too that like there have been certain relationships and services between the coast and Canterbury for many years. They're business relationships, people have badges here, it's all that type of thing. Now speaking as a Canterbury, and I see that's quite a strong thing, and I felt that whole Canterbury West Coast thing was an easy fit, but I'm one person. But this is the time when you just have to put your front foot forward, and we just have to go for it. We don't take out that we're a little bit tardy. We sell the good things. Everyone knows that, but it's if we don't do something, we're going to be stuck in it, and we need for our best thing to do that. So you will know that, but I wouldn't be frightened of doing it. But what we do need to do is keep this thing moving. One of my biggest criticisms, this is a personal thing of the Three Waters thing, is it took forever to get where it got to, and then it just got knocked out because it's taken so long. They should have got that whole process done within about half the time, would be my humble opinion. So what we have to learn as a country is get these efficiencies and move on. That's what the government's saying. But just want to be really clear, because we've poked on this a couple of places yesterday. They're not indicating there's a capital fund of money to help out councils with their water supplies, their wastewater supplies. They're not saying, the government's not saying that at all. What's even more slightly problematic is they're also not saying there's any money to help us get through this process of setting up an establishment. So one of the things when we go down this pathway is that we are going to have to put some money in, and not idea what it will be, but that is part of establishing something that will hopefully make that fundamental change and different scale into the future. So the reason here we've got 3 months is it gives us a chance to understand who we might be joined with, if we can make that work, and there's a lot of good faith here. The comments Tony made about a lot of it got appeared after the earthquakes. Actually, that's not correct. Just wanted to make sure clear on that. Selwyn was very few issues. Waimak had big issues around Kaikoui. Christchurch was pretty well restricted around the eastern Christchurch area. One of the complaints is they probably didn't enough money. So actually, Christchurch has got issues longer term. And there's some say that probably bought some time that they're seeing in Wellington and others, the big cities, the big metros, that bought some time. So it will come. Don't worry about that. We will be putting money from the coast and the Canterbury at some point. And then the 9 to sort of 15, that's me saying, 18, sorry, that's me saying, well, we're here in February 24, we're indicating legislation in place by the middle of 25. We'll know what the legislation looks like Christmas this year. It is important to keep the process going and get on with it. So, yeah, it's just a few thoughts from my perspective.
So, like I'm mindful of time. We're going to rip through some of these issues, but what I want to bring you back to is the reason why we're talking about these challenges now is how does this relate to our long-term planning process? We can stick to our current time frame and get something out to the community end of March. We can seek a deferral to try and get some information, up to a 3-month delay in the process, or we can go for a 12-month. Now, when John summarises the next 4 or 5 points reasonably quickly, I want you to be thinking about how does this affect our long-term plan and our discussion with the community. Because ultimately, that's why we're here today. It's not to resolve water reform, but it's to take on board the information we've received in the last day to go, actually, the game's changed, and a significant part of the game has changed. John?
Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to say, this is around 3 quarters, so isn't it other alternatives just to go ahead with our 12-month, with our long-term plan, maybe with the 1 to 3 month extension, because we can still go through that special consultation process next year around, you know, just the 3 quarters, should we need to, and wouldn't that be a...
What I've done is the next set of slides, what I've done is I've pretty much put this up here, but I've got a slide here that basically outlines potential benefits, potential consequences for us, and then
let's get through the rest of these issues, please.
The water regulations, the change the Minister asked yesterday, or put in, that it needs to be fit for purpose. As it currently stands, we don't know what that means. What is fit for purpose? Because we know that Northern Buller right now is not, certainly not, we wouldn't think it'd be fit for purpose, and we need to understand what we can do. So we've put in time required to resolve, potentially 2 months, as Mike's alluded to, and some central government changes potentially coming in December 2024. As Douglas has spoke about for the last 4 to 8 weeks, we've spoken about district water and wastewater rates. The wording around the change, we need a final proposal, an approach to the change. That'll take us a month to get that, or get the finance team to get that to you guys. Refuse rates and charges, I think we've done a lot of work on. We've done a lot of work in the last 2 or 3 months that I think we've got some nearly final costings that we can share with everyone in terms of proposed changes, in terms of consultation. That will come out within the next 4 weeks. Big one that obviously was in the press yesterday is the next 2 elements around the Westport stormwater and the flood wall defences. What's the annual the capital cost? How much is it going to? What investment's required from us, and what's the annual operating cost for that? That's going to take a bit of time. I think we'll certainly come back with more information on that. And I think the other thing we need to think about in terms of long-term plan process is around the Insurance Transport Agency funding. I.e., we have a reply in the middle of June, or potentially the middle of June, it was August last time, around how we move forward with the triennial. What would that mean if we were to defer the long-term plan for a year? Would we have to commit to the 3 years funding based on an annual plan across 3 different elements? Honestly, we don't know the answer, but I think it's important to point out that as a triennial, it's based on the long-term plans, I'd imagine. But however, what I would say is I would imagine, based on the announcements yesterday, we have to remember that the Minister of Transport and the Minister of Local Government is the same person. So I would imagine that they would have been thinking pretty quickly yesterday when they made that announcement. So that's just things we need to think about. The next slide, and apologies for it being so small, I can't even see it myself, to be honest, in fact I'll be able to get it on screen. I've highlighted, there's a lot of information on this. I'll talk through each element. I'll start by talking about keeping on course for the adoption in June 2024. I've highlighted some benefits, some consequences, potential cost implications, the community impact, and we obviously have to think about what else. Now, apologies, this is just something that you won't have seen before, but that is because it came out with a meeting about it last night at 4:45. So that's how last, not last minute, but that's how much is uncertain at the moment. So potential benefits of keeping on course for adopting in June 2024. As I spoke about earlier on, 80% of the process is already complete. Our document is nearly there, and it potentially avoids some work duplication around the same time next year for both staff and for you guys as well. I think, what I said to the team this morning when we were talking about it is we have had a lot of work into this, so thanks to everyone for that. Some consequences of adopting in June 2024. I think the biggest one is outlined at the top is uncertainty. That word keeps getting bandied around. I think it is absolutely clear. Most likely we'll need to reconsult after the water situation is known, which will obviously involve a couple of things in terms of cost, but also time, of course. The things we put into the long-term plan will need to be completed as adopted. There could be cost savings of billion, and all the information is clearly not known at present as to how we move forward. Some cost implications, they are unknown based on the uncertainty. So the budget will need to change through further consultations. So I think that will have to happen. And it could end up costing our ratepayer more money when potentially, if we do go with a regional CCO for water, etc., it might actually save them a bit of money down the line if we wait. We could be going, the community impact, that we could be going too early to the community, as the certainty is really not known. We may adopt a long-term plan when there is a pretty much a guarantee that we'd have to consult further. And there'll be more consultation requirements, which of course could cost. There's deferring for 1 to 3 months, i.e. deferring before September 2024. The benefits of that is it gives us a little bit more time to understand the water implications. It may provide a little more certainty. It does allow us a bit of time to understand the next steps in terms of eroding, i.e. is the NZTA bid going to be approved? And the eroding steps will be known and understood more. Some consequences, we may not be further forward in terms of some of the key issues. I think in terms of the timeline that Douglas and the team have highlighted this morning, we may not actually be any further forward if we do delay that 12 weeks. A decision will need to be made quickly is how we move forward, given some of the audit implications, because as we know, the auditors are not here yet. But if we do want to adopt later, we'll have, that process has to move on pretty quickly. Potentially delaying the inevitable of having to reconsult again in the future. The rates will need to be struck twice. It will be around the time of the annual report, which of course will lead to more staff and elected members' time, because you'll be adopting an annual report as well as adopting a long-term plan. And it could end up costing the ratepayer more in the long run if we adopt too early. The cost implications I will highlight later on, but the audit fees have increased for this year, up to a maximum of 23%. There's no penalties for deferring the long-term plan. So that in terms of a financial penalty, there's no penalty as it is in legislation, or it will be in legislation that we can do that. And to be honest, the community impact is not really known at present. I said it's not applicable, but I don't really think there is much of a community impact in doing that one. Last but not least, the deferral option of 12 months to adopt in 2025. It will give us more certainty. There's a potential of less unknowns in terms of the layout of the water legislation, i.e. the first bill will be passed and the second bill will be getting passed. It could end up costing the ratepayer less because we might have created a CCO by that time. The consequences of doing that, there are still a lot of unknowns. We are quite far along the current process as everyone's time and resources have been put into, and again I thank you for that. And there will be a potential of a duplication of work, but I think what will be made clear in the legislation, and don't quote me on it please, is I think the things like the environmental scan and all the policy work and all the strategic setting workshops we've had, I think they will be able to transfer over, but like I say, I'm not sure yet. And of course it will be a further staff and elected members' time. The cost implications, there will be some cost implications of the water reform implications. I think Douglas made that clear earlier on. And the community impact, it will take a little longer for the community to understand the layout of the next 10 years. They will have more certainty, I think there's no getting away from that. And the longer term planning will be possible. That's what I've got so far. I'm up for any questions or any debate if you have any. So then if there's any questions that we can put in here or any thoughts, I can put them on the board.
Right, got to be clear, if we do an enhanced annual plan and defer it for a year, that means we still have to consult now and then we have to consult again?
Yes.
Because it seems to me like we are quite through a process. I mean, personally, I'd be in favour either number 1 or number 2. Because we're already through that process that you guys have worked and got something that's 80% complete. If we give it a year, all we're doing is really treating water for a year, and we've still got to make a plan anyway, which is going to be very blurry like everything else. I think we can be as certain this year as we will be next year in our direction forward.
And it's in the narrative in our long-term plan, we can say about the uncertainties and that we realise that there may need to be changes that can be written in, and then you just go through that process. If changes need to be made, you go through a special consultation process as a part of the, like every long-term plan set in some sort of uncertainty. This time there's just a little bit more than what's normal.
This is the sort of discussion we'd like to encourage, because we're not making decisions today, but this certainly helps us shape up decision paper for council in the near future, and it'll be really good to hear what are your questions or concerns or observations about the three options, because that will help us. If we haven't got it up there, that will be essentially our script that we start writing a paper to. Are there any other things that...
Can I just ask, I'll let Linda.
Yeah.
Hey, Linda, just in case, welcome. Just in case I haven't asked you before, have you got any feedback for John about those three options at all?
Not really. I think, yeah, like everybody else is saying, that we probably need some more. Well, yeah, it's a bit of a catch-22, some more information, really. But no questions.
Thank you, Joe.
I think one other point that you do your long-term plan and you're in the middle of your business sort of cycle, and I think there's good reasons for that, which, you know, the documentation, and so I think that's to do your long-term plan, and then you basically would be closing down, ready for the next election cycle. I think it makes sense to keep it in the middle of it too.
Yep, there's an argument in every column, right? What I'm hearing is that not giving you anything, not giving you really any information, bar if you don't do something, we're going to do something. It doesn't really give you any options, does it?
So the water legislation, or the reform policy that the National Party released in, it was either March or April last year, I think it was March.
Yeah.
As everyone knows, we had the National Party here. And one thing that is clear, and it's been made clear in the legislative announcement yesterday, is that we have to have a sustainable funding plan in 12 months' time to go to the central government with. That is one certainty that we're doing it, because that's going to be put in the legislation.
Even though there's not much in the 12-month deferral column, I'm leaning towards getting the most accurate information we can, sweating it out, and if it means that we have to put more time into more consultation, but it saves the ratepayers money in the long run, because we have the most time to get the most correct information to make the plan, I'm leaning towards that.
Anyways.
I agree that there'll be no more certainty in 12 months than we do have today. I think everything will still be up in the air and things will change, because that's what happens. I think the water is a really, really important thing, and to have a separate consultation process is beneficial. So I would be in favour of the first or second option.
Grant.
Yeah, I think just want to do it right. Yeah, I've got no interest in reconsulting and stuff like that. As you say, the uncertainty is going to be there all the time.
I think one thing I did point out of that as a potential consequence, I think if we were to adopt in June or September, I think we would have to reconsult again. I think that's something that is absolutely certain, because there will be changes come the legislation. So I guess there's two ways to look at it. Do we wait 12 months and have potentially a little bit more certainty where the land is with water, essentially, and of course the NZTA stuff, and then it might cause less consultations because you're already have done it at that point. So yeah, I think to Tony's point, sorry, I think there's elements of each area that we need.
So they're really clear, that doesn't mean there'll be consulted on LTP in the next few months, or in 12 months. For an annual plan now, or in 12 months, you will be consulting twice. And as Mike alluded to as well, you may even decide to consult a third time on your water issues. So I don't have the consultation whether or not they'll be the same level of consultation. I just understand, just pragmatically, so we've had a bit of a talk in the team this morning about how do we carve off an annual plan and make that work. Yes, there's a bit of work that Faye and Lynn needs in the background to do just an annual plan, and we can't really get that sorted until we get back to the field legislation we've got today when it comes out. So that's a next week job. But to be fair, that's a little bit of bit of work in the background that can be achieved. The thing that Mike and I focused on this morning in one of our sessions is we are quite well down an LTP process. So if we pick up an LTP and then we figuratively move it out another 12 months, a lot of the stuff we've got in years 1, ignored for a moment, is there for the annual plan. Now, there is talk about how the long-term plan from 21 to 31 creates that document. We've got to work through that. That's something that's come out this morning. But if you also think about years 2 to 10, we've done a lot of work now. So the long-term plan we go to do, which could be the 25 to 35 long-term plan, well, it's done. So the workload as we see it is a bit more perhaps next year because we've had it audited. The auditor's done a bit of work this year, which is, the cost we're going to incur, but that's unfortunately where we are. So I think the consultation and how we compare it, that's something we can manage if we push out or do now. I know John's got up there June. I just think that would be a real hard push right now. We can probably do end of July to adopt a final. Because all this stuff has been not treating water as such, but we have over the last week.
Yeah, and I think you add in the audit element of that, Douglas, as well, is that our auditors aren't here yet. So I think the chance of getting adopted at the end of March, which we were hoping for, our auditors aren't here.
And I'm just, sorry, but I'm jumping in ahead of a couple of councillors. I know I should be very careful doing that. But just to touch on Douglas's point, and one of the key issues around keep on course, and this is why there might be a delay anyway, is that we have to fund work to develop a funded plan. And that currently does not sit in any budget that we have. And so we need to figure out how are we actually going to develop this. And this is going to be an extra cost on us in the next financial year, regardless of delay or not. We are going to have to build that in. We need to now figure out how much time and effort is a sustainable funding plan look like without necessarily the scope or the criteria to what does that actually mean. So there's the risk of at least a small delay in the process regardless, because we need to do that. So I just wanted to add that in.
Rosalie.
Well, Douglas answered a lot that I was going to say. The fact that we're just about there for the annual plan, and I just feel we just go with the annual plan now and delay long-term plan, because it will have all the uncertainty that we've got now going for pushing it out for 12 months, and we'll be able to deal with that. So I think the only sensible way to go is to push LTP out for 12 months and round off our annual plan now with a bit more certainty.
Thank you. Annalise, you had your hand up.
No.
You did. You did lie. I was just going to say, it sounds to me like the council staff preferred option is to delay it. Is that what I'm hearing?
No.
And or can I ask different questions? What is your preferred option and why?
Let me answer that on behalf of the team.
Because you're leaving, so no pressure on you.
No pressure, but we had a decent, I mean, obviously this, again, 24 hours is how much time we've had to have this information. We had a debate last night. We had a debate again this morning, and I can tell you we are not all on the same page. We're doing exactly what you're doing. We're debating the merits of going hard and going early with what we've got, and no, we're going to have to do it anyway, versus we're actually more time and certainty gives a better conversation for the community. We aren't on the same page, so I'm not going to answer what's our preferred option because we're not there. Part of the conversation today is just testing out what are your questions or concerns or worries, because that helps us bring you back advice to make a call on.
Tony.
I think it's Phil, because he had his hand up first on fair.
Oh, did you have your hand? I thought you were scratching your ear. Sorry, Phil.
So just going by what Douglas, Steve and John have just said, are we now down to two options? To make it simpler, do we forget about number one? We can't get there, so why are we discussing it? We're not going to make it. Why are we? Let's simplify, make things a little bit easier.
Make a decision, John.
If one's gone.
Again, we're not making decisions today. But point noted. Yeah. We just don't know the quantum. We still can pull it off. but we'll give you a decision and you can make that, and we will give you the risks of us going on 30 June. And we'll tell you the risk and consequence and the benefit of doing that in a paper later, but again, we note what you're saying.
I think the thing that's really clear is that all this has changed based on not ever doing. From nobody sitting around this table is that, you know, that's the way of the world now, unfortunately, in terms of this situation. So yeah, I think we're going to pay for that.
Thanks, Tony.
I understand that staff and us as a governors, everyone's put a whole lot of work and effort into getting where we are now. But why are we doing it? It's for the outcomes of our people, and if it means that, you know, you've done all this hard work and everything, but really, you know, it's the why, and the why is our people, and if it means that we're going to get the most out of that referral, even though it means more work, or we're just about there, or however you want to break it down, ultimately, what is the best outcome for our people?
I mean, I guess that's the same debate, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think as well, we talk about more working things. What I would say is the things that we've done this year can be shifted to next year. I think, and then don't get, could be wrong, but I think we think, please don't quote me on it. But I think all the work we've put in so far, ultimately it's 12 months down the line, we can still use I'm sure we can still use the process. If I'm wrong, please do it. I think.
Judge.
I'm just like different view. I think the community needs a bit of direction. I think we've been sitting back in limbo over a number of issues in the past, and I know for me personally, not knowing the future and direction inhibits my choices moving forward. And so even though it might be an imperfect long-term plan, me as a ratepayer, I'd like some direction or some thought of council about what are the issues they're facing and what direction they wish to take. Even though affordability is the big stumbling block. So that's my preference.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
It doesn't matter what you do, the media is going to have a field day. That's it. It doesn't matter which one you choose, they will find a problem with each one of those.
To me, I think that's like not an issue that we have to worry about. I think I agree with Tony. You know, it's about the best for our community. You know, not the best for our newspaper, even though they're on TV and not. Colin, I haven't heard from you. I miss your voice, your dulcet tones. What have you got any view in this? Yeah.
First up, apologies for lateness. I had 11 o'clock on my head, and then thought it was 11:30, which is why I was here on time for 11:30. So apologies for being 15 minutes late.
You wouldn't be opposed to a delay then?
So as for delays, you know, I'm still thinking about it, to be honest with you. There's a bit of discussion going on here. And perhaps some misunderstanding, I believe, or lack of understanding. As was pointed out by Douglas and somebody else, regardless if we go out for consultation this year, we're still going to have to go out for consultation next year. So it doesn't really matter. So the whole idea of saying, well, we'll do it once is not true, I'm afraid to say. We opted not to go out for consultation, rightly or wrongly, for annual plan 23-24, and we utilised the section in the LGA, rightly or wrongly. I'm not going to go over past ground. Regardless, now, given the cost increases that we're looking at, even now for year one of the long-term plan, they're then going to come into the following year as well. So we're going to have to consult regardless for the next 2 or 3 years, unless council opts not to. But we'll just park that for now. Adopt for June 24. At the moment, there's a lot of holes. To suggest that let's go with what we've got now is for me taking a if I say, we're trying to bury something, sweep something under the carpet as far as I'm concerned. If we adopt June 24, we've still got the same issues, and we have an annual plan or long-term plan that's really not fit for purpose because it's going to change again. So that cuts out the June 24, 1 to 3 months time, we're not going to know anything different. And I take on board I know we're about 80% down the track anyway, but I take on board the fact that we've got annual report coming up around that time. So whether the focus is going to be then on amendments or improvements to the long-term plan, or focus on the annual report, it's just too much at this time, too much pressure on staff. And I can vouch for that, okay? So for me, 1 to 3 is out of the question. As far as the extension, which is very, very much appreciated, when a bill gets put through Parliament, as we know, it can be debated and what have you, and so I'm a little bit weary about this revised one that's come out for the 12-month deferral. The fact that the current government has a majority suggests to me that the bill's going to go through. It's just a matter of timing. As for 12 months, and I'm not saying that everything, because of what I'm about to say, everything's got to stop. But we have at the moment a CFO who I understand finishes in June. We have a CEO who finishes at the end of March. We've got quite a large void here, quite a large void. As I said before anyone says anything about, oh, do we stop everything and hold our breath? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we have some deep holes that need to be filled. And the fact that the government is offering councils, and I'm only going to talk about BBC, that's what we're talking about, a 12-month deferral, I believe we should take that 12-month deferral. But then generates, and I hear what Douglas is saying, that we have basically 24, 25 sussed out anyway. But there's a lot of queries, obviously, and I've presented a lot just recently. But so there's still a lot of debate going on about that. We've also got year 2, which will be 25, 26, essentially covered off. Still a lot of work to be done, but it's just a matter really of waiting on 3 waters, and we still don't have definitive answers on NZTA funding. So, you know, if the government wasn't offering the 12-month deferral, then fine, we're going to be under pressure to get a lot of these things done. And even if we took the 1 to 3 months option, it's still not enough to get us out of jail. So for me, given a lot of the uncertainties that are there, both staffing and legislation and funding, I believe the 12 months option, we should take it and thank the government for that. And it gives us some breathing space. And that's what we require.
I think that's a very compelling argument, Colin. So you came late, but it's a very compelling argument, and I would have to say you made some very good points, and certainly in terms of staffing as well. The fact that we'll have a new staff to actually support the completion of a long-term plan I think would be actually quite a positive. Yeah, so thank you. And Tony, lucky last day, I reckon.
Just backing you up, Colin, just like that, as far as operation go, any sort of changes we have to have a workshop, a paper, a meeting to agree. How long is that all going to take? I mean, that's like your 3 months gone. This is what, you know, so I just can't see how you can physically do it sensibly on no information. Yeah, that's my opinion.
I think everyone's had a good say now, and I think it's there is some direction, but obviously it's, enough information to put a paper forward, that's for sure. And so that'll happen, I guess, at the next, is it the next one or the one after?
That was going to be a question if, when.
I think what staff, if I may, is what we now need to do is take on the feedback, and there's been some really good feedback that most of what you've talked about we've covered. There's a couple of things that you've introduced that we haven't. So we need to take this on board, and we now need to bring back a paper as quickly as we can. But it might be in March, because I think what we need to do is see the legislation and the detail come out, especially around the mechanism around a 12-month deferral. How does it actually work? What are the criteria we need to have in place? There are some of the things that we don't quite know yet, but we may find out within the next 2 to 3 days, if not the next week. So I think we're looking at a paper in March to put these 3 options together. I don't think there are any other options on the table. And then the council can then ratify directional travel from that point. But thank you very much for your feedback and discussion. That's been really helpful for us.
Okay, I'm sorry, Colin.
I'll just make mention, I agree fully with the March paper. I don't believe we need an extraordinary, just a March council. We've got until the end of April anyway, which is kind of fine if we start looking at that. But I agree with March, and also it ties in, I believe, with the departure of Steve, so we can actually put a tick beside that and it's finalised.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yes, the only difference is that if we want to keep option 1 live, the council meeting in March is when we adopt the LTP and draft and go for consultation. So I think if we're going to respect option 1, we probably do need to come back in early March. So it could be an extraordinary after RAC or before RAC, just to give us that separation, to enable that to be a legitimate option for us to consider. And I think there's been some feedback around the table that there is some interest in still going ahead. So I think we might look at an early mid-March councillor reading. But thank you.
I admit it, I forgot about the option 1, so correct.
Well, it is now 12:25. We're going to have adjourned till 12:30 on the knocker. So 5 minutes to
Refresh yourselves.
refresh yourselves. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for the discussion. Yeah.
Back again. Thank you for waiting, and we'll carry on with the long-term plan thing.
It's all sorted.
Thank you. So, this looks to me, John, like Lynn's time to shine. So, Lynn, are you presenting this particular portion?
I'll make a start and talk about this, and Douglas will pick up on it as well. So when we last met with you, we were expecting to bring forward more budgets and more debt and more rates changes to you. Of course, as you understand, discussion we had this morning, it is very much shuffling sands, and it's very, very tricky to bring forward too much more. I wanted to show you where we were last time. We're not too far away from where we've been because we keep bringing up questions that are coming forward. So we're looking for rates increases. It's still a shape at the moment, same sort of shape. Where we're saying very high rates in year 1, in year 2 and 3 really respectively, and then thereafter falling away. And the same thing is also showing around the debt profile. And the debt issue is really, really significant for us. It's something we're still working through in order to understand and make sure that we get clear with our bankers, our providers, that we're well informing them about what's happening for the council, and making sure that we're looking at opportunities to actually look for other forms of debt, and making sure we're aware of the options there, as in further borrowings from LGFA. One of the issues that was spoken about earlier this morning was the discussion about the entity, forming an entity with other councils around us, and of course that would completely strip out our balance sheet and change how things look with debt and with the assets there if something happened in that form. It just depends how it lands and what the actual framework that looks like for that vehicle. So one of the things we have to be really careful about is our existing LTP says to us that we're not allowed to, and a significance in engagement policy, we're not allowed to actually make significant changes there without it being inside the thing. So that's another part we maybe need to end the board from. It's about some of the legislation that's happening at pace. That's, as Councillor Reedy rightly says, it's probably going to move at the speed, but other aspects we need to be aware of, and we don't blow ourselves up. For example, we can't go into significant divestment that created Douglas. We're not allowed to do that without actually having consultation and having our understanding around that. So things aren't quite as clear cut as we would like. So I think I'll just give you an opportunity to add to that, Douglas, thank you. And
so just to extend on that, so we've got a short list of things that we know can be potentially move around and the effects to generate and the target rate. So we're looking at something today, but we also want to listen to that potential drop decision later today just to see what others have come up with. So we are still moving, trying to move things down a bit. But I suppose the thing just to pick up on Lynn said, that the debt profile has very much been a focus for us. It's the sort of thing that if we are having, obviously our waters are moving off, then we need to look really hard in conjunction with the guys in the engineering team about, okay, well, what stuff do we really need to do, say, after June 25, and therefore, how does it impact on our borrowings? Because that is something we need to be really clear about. I mean, obviously, the assumption given is that if we're passing all our assets over to a council control entity amongst a few councils, we're also passing debt across, so we're not looking into debt with us, that's not a concern. But we also want to make sure we don't if we don't need to go out and borrow, then we do try and avoid that. But we've got to be mindful too, we don't actually have a pipe that must be replaced, but we say, we don't want to borrow. We've got to get that careful balance. So buying a little bit more time as this legislation gets itself a bit clearer. The one thing we did, we got written an assumption that we would have capital monies coming from the government. The line for that this morning, that's not happening. The other issue too, that there's a bit of area in terms of some staff roles and some contracting consultant staff in particular, that if we're not needing to do that work as part of build-up the water utility, then we have to look at that as well. What's prudent to push out? But again, we've got to be really careful because we've got to be prudent about the systems we're providing. So from our perspective, we're definitely further ahead. We've got today's session, we're dropping back today. Any notes you want to see through us, and then we'll be sort of giving a more look at. This is where we think we sit. based on whether, and there is, some may say, well, it's not a big deal. Well, if we do defer for 12 months, that gives us a little bit more flexibility about how we run some of that stuff. And there is, as we highlighted there, and I thought there was a couple of really good articles in the West Coast News yesterday about this water issue, wastewater, but also about where we're sitting with the wall and the stormwater issue there, because that stormwater cost and project is something that's coming, and that's where our balance is. I've talked pretty clearly over the last few months. We need to understand the Building District Council rates. We need to also understand what the West Coast Regional Council needs to do over our community in terms of rating for services. And, very minor, but we also just need to be mindful of electricity. A small little entity, there's some articles yesterday which was sort of useful to read as well. They've got a few challenges, they'll manage those. But it's the same problem as we know. So, yeah. Still good. Just on the financial strategy, it is very much a similar looking document to the previous 3 years, which I personally I thought actually it's good practice, what I felt. But issues around getting a few numbers that we just need to align a bit further forward and actually say right that. So yeah.
Yeah, so the next section around the financial strategy, the infrastructure strategy, and the key performance indicators for the business. We've obviously sent out the documents a couple of evenings ago. It's more so that the team will talk through it very briefly, and it's more so like if you have any questions on it, any changes you want to see. As you know, they are live documents. So, for example, Colin had mentioned a couple of fees and charges that have not been quite updated as accordingly compared to the annual plan. We're currently doing that at present, but it's more so in line. Is the documents what you're looking to see? Is there anything you think we need to add in, or anything you think that's we could strip out? So that's kind of the process, because the Auditor General has outlined for this year or next year, however you want to take it, that the financial strategy and the infrastructure strategy are very much going to be audited in line with each other as very prudent working documents that should really pretty much match. So any questions around the financial strategy that Douglas and Lynn had shared a couple of nights ago?
So the highlighted things are the things that you're looking at.
They're things that have got to get added in, yeah, because that will be based on any infrastructure decisions that we take.
Yeah, like maximum debt ceiling.
Exactly, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
And the other thing I saw somewhere was about lending. You're not able to have more than a 30-year lending window. Is there any thought about maybe changing that? Spread the cost in a longer period of time.
So normally local government would have borrowed somewhere over a 20 to 30-year type of window. When I look at borrowing windows, my first question is this borrowing for capital works that has a resource consent to it? So you probably didn't say it before, but if you've got about to start growing a wastewater plant in Westport, and you've got a resource consent that gives you sort of 30 years, then you can borrow for 30 years, because the consent's there, you know what it is. But if that consent is only 10 years, and resource consents can tend to, as you go to renew them, and more cost and whatever else, you don't want to be paying debt on debt. So that's the thing there. But certainly the national ones are coming to power and say, oh yeah, local councils should just borrow longer. 30 years probably been a maximum debt figure that most of the local governments see, but there is some logic in saying, well, if you put a pipe in the ground for 70 years, what if you borrow for 7 years? Yeah, maybe that is the way to go. It's just the question, as you can appreciate. You generally can't issue, say, a bond. So a bond has got a fixed period. A bond, local government essentially might issue for, say, 5 or 10 years. Overseas, they do have bonds that we can issue for some of those 50, 60-year periods. The reason they're attractive or unattractive is your view about whether you hold that bond with certainty of payment or certainty of costs. But when you have that certainty, people tend to price them a bit more aggressively. But again, it's another tool. If they bring it, that would be good. We just need to have some flexibility now on strategy, thinking about those sort of things going forward. But remembering that our borrowing is predominantly around our water and wastewater work over the years, and the piece of borrowing that we have around the centre set up through the whole income and structured years. So that kind of borrowing will probably always sit there anyway, because it has its own funding stream for the way that companies set up. It's a good tax sort of planning structurally heavy with stuff. We always have something, but maybe not as much as waters have gone.
Thank you.
Just like an opportunity to add to what Douglas was saying here. The key thing for us to look through as a group and work through is that the financial strategy that we have holding in our hands right now is a really prudent, moderate one, which we've had for a long time. Councillor Sampson, you'll be very familiar with the approach that the financial strategy is. It's sort of got four legs like a chair. It says we're not going to lift rates unless we can actually, potentially gain some other revenue from it. We're not going to invest in things unless we can see some reduction in rates. We're looking to be really moderate and careful. And it's looking at the community and the feeling that the sense of this the Bulla district's had is that's brought with it. Sort of a story of being, aware of that heartbeat of the mining industry as it goes up and down, and what actually impact that has in our community. So what we've got is we're holding this precious, approach. And what we found over the last 6 years in particular, it's actually really changed. So, 6 years back, we had a long-term plan that sort of talked about $50 million of capital spend. 21, 31 was 100, double. Now we're looking at something in the order of 180, 200 in this one that we're looking at. So you can see where we're heading in terms of capital work. And our chair and CEO, has been really, really good to talk to us as a team and say to us, look, we're looking at a very big trajectory of a lot more activity. What do you need? Can we deliver it? And so forth. What does the community need? Essentially, though, the key driver of that change hasn't been the wish of the community as such. It's been the wish of, it's been the legislation changes. And so I think I just want to point out we need to be really careful that we look at this financial strategy and we're very, very clear that what we've had before is gone. So we're going to have to make some significant changes and they're going to be tricky, but we need to be mindful. There's probably an approach that's prudent, careful, and down here. There's probably an approach here. We're obviously looking for that middle ground and trying to make sure we're still moderate with that, because essentially this is public money. It's a real privilege to spend it and look after it. So we have to be mindful of that. So I just wanted to mention that around the financial strategy, and I think the questions about debt length, the return of loans, how much debt, rates increases, those are the three key levers in here, as well as what we're prepared to do. And I think that we may well be in a place in time when we start to look again, like we have at the port of opportunities in our commercial side of things, where can we try and grow some revenues so we're not so reliant on rates, which is about 60% at the moment. So I know that's another question for another day. I just want to mention that sort of the thinking. These are the things we reckon at the time. So I think we should sit down and meet with that. I'd like some feedback if that's possible.
Looks like you're going to get some. Thank you, Joe.
One that's very important to me, the setting in that is setting of affordability, and that can be done against different national guidelines and everything like that. Which I think once we set that affordability on what our ratepayers can see based on good data, that's going to affect all the three waters and all these other things, because that's going to support our decisions on when we go ahead and we say, look, no, we can't comply. Is that figure? So I think that's going to be very well thought out and justified. That's our decision making level on whether we go ahead and do something or not, even if we're legislated that we're meant to do it.
I think it's a good point, but just flag one of the reforms in the water was financial sustainability. Fine, but just got to flag it, that may not be consistent with the fact you're really paid. So, because people's aspirations need to be clear on that.
Rosalie.
Yeah, I take, just listening to what Lynn's has just said is exactly right, that we looked at the aspirations of the district and our following wasn't great, but it was spread across the district. But the key thing now, as was pointed out, that all this major cost for our water sewage, which are targeted rates, which are for people within the central areas rather than right across the district. So affordability is gone out the window as far as the people on targeted rates, because they're just over the top. And again, it's not giving us those for the outer areas no sort of ways of looking at improvement or rights to have as enhancing our communities, because the affordability is driven by the targeted rates, which is not, it just isn't affordable at the moment. So outside targeted rates, there's nothing that we're spending capital on.
Thank you. Tony.
A lot of this expense going up is through, it's coming from central, through reform and whatever, it's not coming from the people as far as being able to afford. So, we're taking that power, they're taking the power away from us. And, who in the country is going to say, bloody hell, come on then, and just like, make a stand and say, are you going to cancel my birthdays? I mean, what are they actually going to do here if you don't do it? Because you can't afford it. You can't afford it. How do you afford it? It's just a simple fact. I mean, who's got the biggest guns, I suppose, when it comes to having a say of how much you pay and if you can put food on the blooming table. I mean, it's getting that bad. And yeah, sorry, I'm having a little rant here, but
Yeah, I think Buller got small guns though, to be honest.
they've got deep mine shafts.
2 points that I made, please, just up on what Tony's saying. You can afford it or not afford it, it doesn't really matter when it comes to having to pay for fines that are set by district or high court. You've got no option but to pay them. So the point I'm making there is that with the water regulator, for example, they're setting some standards, rightly or wrongly. I don't want to bring it up at the moment though, because we've agreed to park it, but the fact of the matter is we can't use the excuse of we can afford or not afford it. We also have to be conscious of the legislation that's supporting central government in, if you like, in enforcing some certain standards against districts like us, which have only got pop guns. Okay, that's all we've got. Yeah. The other point I'd like to make is, and once again, we've agreed to park what Lynn mentioned about other revenue streams. Are we live here? Yes. Or yes. We're out in the public? Yes. Okay. Other revenue streams is a nice to have. We in recent times, Buller has seen exiting, not incoming, in terms of revenue streams. And one of the good ones, of course, is the whitebait farm. Everyone was going rah rah. We've got some. It's all coming in. We had COVID was around at the time, but there were other factors as well, of course, which I won't go into. That prevented that from continuing. We've got Westland Mines at the moment, which are mineral mines, mineral sands, sorry, who are also, we've got some potential there, but that potential has been around and it's been recorded in, in our minutes and what have you, agenda items. 2 years has elapsed and we still haven't really seen a lot, and we're still waiting. The point I'm making, I'm not trying to be negative on this one. What I'm saying is that to attract other revenue streams is very, very difficult in the Buller. And I believe there's a bit too much emphasis put on it, and we should be looking at a status quo, a neutral position in this area. It's a nice to have, but we shouldn't be banking on it. So therefore it comes back to where our main revenue stream is, and that is the ratepayer. So that's all I want to say on that. But I understand what you're saying about the other revenue streams, but we've got to be realistic. and perhaps take a more conservative approach in terms of the other revenue streams and look at the impact on the ratepayer.
Thanks, Colin.
Yes, Phil.
Well, just to add on that, I think it's the exact opposite for the fact that we can find funding for many, many different things like climate adaptation and all the rest of it we've done. And I think in the last decade or two, we've done very little to look at revenue. And I think that is the key. If there's any funding or whatever, that's what needs to be looked at, because we can rate, and we will be, I don't believe this is going to be the worst year. It's going to get worse and worse for a few years to come. Without revenue from outside of some sort, we're not getting out of this hole. And I just don't think we've done enough to find revenue to source it. And if there needs to be funding available, if there was, to find some outside sources more to what we just have. I think mineral sands just pretty much fell into our lap, so I might be wrong there, but hopefully that's a good go. But apart from that, there hasn't been a lot in a long time.
I think Epic Centre would be a positive story, I would say, however. That's just an indication of how you can actually work remotely. And that's something we need to sell. Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I agree that the need to have is probably a couple extra thousand ratepayers, but and the option of DOC, sort of like 87% of our land's unrateable, that's going to die a natural death because they're cutting back everywhere now. So there was an option to get money off the government, through the stewardship land and stuff like that, for the land we can't rate. And so I mean that sort of died off too.
Would still be minimal though.
It would be minimal.
Yeah.
I agree with Phil. I think we absolutely know we can't rely on rates to cover our expenses, so we've got to look at other avenues.
I think that's pretty.
Not enough.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear from all the data that we've been given. Rates aren't going to cover what needs to happen, and we've got to find some sources, and we've got to. I agree. We need to be conservative, but we need to be conservatively optimistic. I think we need to just keep our ears open and maybe our red tape at a minimum to encourage people to come into the community and give it a crack. So it's just how we do that, and how do we get the energy to do that, Tony?
If you're looking at investment and attracting people here, and everyone's sort of lost to try and find that answer, why don't we have like some sort of public brainstorming event and work with our people to try and find some solutions. We've got like so much natural resource here. How can we say that there's nothing we can do to get more money or get more people to come here? It's ridiculous, We're just like giving up. I mean, why don't we just break through that wall and actually get to some nitty-gritty and get some brains together and see what comes out of it. From that's how you start your trajectory. You can't just sit in your hands and go, whatever. I mean, we've got hydro, we've got like so much stuff we could be doing here and we're making big money, and that, we need to build, we need to invest to make money. I just think get some people together and start having these bigger questions, because it's obviously the elephant in the room. It's like, how do we attract people,
Go.
I think we've got a lot of economic strategies are very difficult, and I think that's probably why we have developed West Coast and we do it on a regional scale. So I think that's really important to be pushing the reality of finding money from elsewhere. It's difficult. The electricity price and other things aren't going to help. I'll come back to it. There was another thing I was actually doing, I was hanging that for, but I'll come back to me.
Linda, haven't talked to you for a while. Have you got any comment?
Yeah, I agree with everyone's comments that it would be great to try get outside funding, but yeah, affordability is obviously one of our keys, but I just don't know how long. I guess every council's facing this dilemma. So until we get some answers about all the centrally funded things, such as, you know, where the water and that's go, we're at a tipping point where, yeah, we know our rates are going to go up, but by how much? And then what's going to happen nationwide when all councils are faced with this and nobody can afford their rates? So I don't know. I don't have any answers.
Thank you.
So the point I was going to raise is quite a few other councils are looking around accommodation or visitor levy, and given that a lot of our driving things are our 3 wards and everything, it sort of makes sense. So whether that needs to be.
It's a shame we can't tariff coal, but they're really.
Not as hard to illustrate, though, the costs outweigh the benefits.
Right, Tony, lucky last.
You know, it's just getting more and more and more like you just bring your hand out all the time. It's just, where's the sustainability? Where's the work on that in here? You know, it's just like give us, because we can't sustain it here. I mean, surely, I know you have to do a little bit of that just coming from here, but when we start really working on what the key problems, you can't change anything until you really crack that egg. And maybe, you know, you could say that the development West Coast job and everything, I mean, we've had issues with them. I mean, how much effort are they putting in? How much are we doing? How do you get blaming other people all the time? We need to do some work on it. So that's my thought.
Right, thank you, Tony. I think we will move on, and I see a new slide. John.
Yeah, I just wanted to very quickly put this in there. Received this from the Auditor General last week. And I say these slides will be shared with you guys tonight, obviously after the changes last night. But the background of the audit fees is, in the previous long-term plan, there was a 2021 to 2031, so an overall increase of 7.75% spread across each of the portfolios. In reality, this led to a long-term plan fee increase being indexed at 7.75%. This approach is taken us further away from fees that reflect the actual effort and cost. That's what we're saying from an OAG perspective. And obviously, they have a need to have realistic fees. Just so everyone knows that how the fees will be set for the 2024-2034 long-term plan. There will be a maximum of a 23% increase on the audit fee from 2021-31, that's excluding GST and recoveries. They say it's caused by the inflationary impact over the last 3 years. And if you don't have your consultation document audited, that is discounted to 21%, which obviously reflects a marginal impact of that. The reason 23%, they've arrived at 23% in OAG is that they saw a CPI increase of 17.7% based on September 21 to 23. They say that professional services salary inflation for the past 2 years has increased by 24%, and the increases in the ASP charge out rates from the financial year 21 to 24. So just so everyone in this room is clear, I think we've been in public for quite a long time. So I wanted to outline that that's what the audit fees will charge, will be charged for the next 10 years, or the audit for the next 10 years.
Is the base rate a set fee, sort of base rate?
Well, no, I don't know if Douglas has discussed that, or Steve's discussed that with Ernst & Young yet, in terms of what the rate will be, but I think Alan just outlined in the OAG have highlighted that there's going to be a maximum of 23% increase.
No, we have a discussion on this at the stage. So that's not really.
So is that from the OAG?
Yes.
So and all audit companies, firms have to abide by that?
Yes. So just very brief, just so everyone knew that I think it was good to highlight earlier that there will be a change in the fees for this time round. Moving on to Mike, and similar again, obviously setting the new infrastructure strategy. I think there's quite a lot of updates from 2021 on this one, so I'm that one. Again, this is just highlighting the fact that the part of the Local Government Act that highlights what the infrastructure strategy is. Do you have any questions on it, knowing that, as I said, it is a live vote from Mike?
shall I give it?
You can give a.
Yeah, I'll give it an overview. Well, thank you. So we know that the purpose of the infrastructure strategy is to identify the significant infrastructure issues. So we're all familiar with that, and actually the 30-year look ahead, which is the timeframe of the infrastructure strategy, as different to the LTP, remains, as we've stated, as an affordable asset preservation and compliance infrastructure strategy. So we're mindful of these, we call them triple constraints: affordability, community outcomes, and compliance, service level and public health and the like. At our December 6th workshop, we walked through the nearer horizon strategies within this, and we talked about slip, hold, lift, and we didn't even really discuss unconstrained, which is the version where money is not an issue. Of course, money is the issue, and so this particular infrastructure strategy is aligned with that December 6th workshop, where the proposition is to hold, particularly our aspirations and opportunities in transport. I understand we've managed to get that down to the range that we spoke about in terms of impact to rates, and certainly notwithstanding the three waters matters that we've discussed today, we see transport as our solid ground, and the other components being solid waste and property. We're really looking to just keep it, keep it maintained and sustained where it is. You will note in the actual document there's a lot of yellow highlighted. That's just to note that the actual financials that feed into this are subject to the confirmation of budgets. I hope that made sense, that we just need to wait for everything to align, and we drop in the data which populates graphs and tables and all that sort of thing. And I just wanted to link it back to the overall topic of today, which is what about the LTP and the options here. It's worth noting that the strategy, and certainly the near horizon strategy, in our whole position, we have not included many of the things that we talk about in the future considerations. For example, the Northern Border water supplies. There's no capital expenditure in the strategy budgets going and attending to what's needed there. In a similar way, we don't have Punakaiki water new supply in there. So I think in terms of relativity to what would be for example, year one, what would be the difference between year one LTP and say an annual plan plus version? In an infrastructure sense, I hardly see any difference. That is to say, we're not having to take things out for three waters because we didn't actually have them in. Westport Water is an exception to that because we feel that there's a resilience issue there that is highest in our priority list. But I wouldn't say that we would need to go and take a lot of things out in order to attend to the three water situation. We didn't actually put a lot of it in, for the same reason. It was uncertain. So we were taking a path of the affordability is not to commit that funding. We probably would have been qualified, possibly would have been qualified for it. So no matter which way you go, I just wanted to emphasise that in terms of the three waters aspect of the strategy, actually there's not a lot of budgeting that went into it. We just noted it that at some point we're going to need some funding solutions for this. But in all other respects, happy to take questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Duff?
I picked up a couple of spelling mistakes, but I'll just email those through. Somebody else has probably seen them anyway. You get waster instead of water and other grease.
Yeah, probably. Yes, sorry, Colin.
In terms of what we're discussing at the moment, strategy, infrastructure, and what have you, financial, are we making decisions now or not?
No.
We just talked about it.
Yeah.
So, we're making, I shouldn't say decisions, we're making decisions to come to a paper for adoption. And I sent an email out the other night regarding what comes first, because a lot of these policies, strategies, policies, include the long-term plan. So is the cart before the horse, or horse before the cart, in terms of what we are proposing? I'm still a bit lost.
I might answer that. So the cart and horse are connected.
Yeah.
And that you need to have these strategies in place to inform your long-term plan or your draft long-term plan. And so we need the package to be all connected, lined up, so that that's what we do take to the community for consultation. And so there's a strong connection between finance strategy and infrastructure strategy, and they directly relate to the long-term plan budget, the levels of service, and the cost of service. And so they all have to be approved and draft by you so that we can take them all out as the proposal to the community to consult on. Douglas,
Yeah, I suppose just to, what we've done this long-term plan is, as we've completed parts of the long-term plan, we've issued them out to get a bit of feedback. Now, we clearly know that we need to have some, issued this like a couple of days ago. We have some workshops somewhere in the next 2 to 4 weeks. We'll just go through those in a bit more detail. And the whole idea is that once we get to the long-term plan adoption, which we'll make a call on, there will be a complete document that will be around for a few weeks. So that therefore the bits and pieces that roll up to that one document will get to make sure we're happy with. So the idea here is chance for you to read, give us some initial feedback. If you don't give us anything, we'll assume you're happy with it, because we really have used that. The basis of last time was good, just make some adjustments. So if you want to come and have specific sessions on a particular policy or document, then just give us a call, drop some notes, and we'll have it. Thanks.
And similar situation with policies, Lynn's been all over these. Obviously, there's a few policies that make up a long-term plan document, i.e. the significance and engagement policy, potential development contributions policy that will potentially change based on the options taken moving forward, your revenue and financing policy. So I've sent these out the other night based on what we had in 2021. Clearly, there's a couple of bits that have to get updated based on the decisions that you guys take in the next wee while. But yeah, if there's any questions for us, then please go and link them.
I just thought some of the commentary did need updated, because it did talk about sort of new major projects, and that's 3 years ago. So I wouldn't think new ones around district revitalisation and implementing the information systems are well on the way. So I think they could be taken out of the commentary.
Yeah, like I say, there's things that will definitely be updated. There's more so to give you what it looked like back 3 years ago. And like you say, thanks for highlighting that myself.
So my understanding was you put the new heading on, but the next thing is to go back and
just go back and tweet it and update it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, yes, I think the question for us, and I know we've done a lot of work this morning and it's the afternoon, so trying to bore you with dry policy talk, but they're really important. So when you get an opportunity to skim through, if there's something that is going to generate some discussion amongst, we'd like to know to bring it back. Is there an area, a policy area that you're particularly worried about? You think there's significant changes, I'd like to know. Because otherwise the practical application of these policies is we use the last draft, we update it to make sense with the information. But again, it's chicken and egg, which one comes first around our councillor's question earlier about whether or not affordability is the driver or some other issue. So I'm hoping that you get a quick chance to look through them and let us know if it's something that's you think could be solved by policy, and then we can introduce and we eventually go to adopt, because it's cleaner and tidier. For example, is a significant issue in deal with rates separately as a question for consultation when we get there around how do we strike the rates and so forth, but there's other issues there's no Is there anything?
I think one thing probably to highlight in terms of the revenue and financing policy, we also discussed around affordability and some of the key differences to our capital investment based on the last 3 to 6 years, as Lynn alluded to earlier on. I think part of that policy will have to potentially change based on the decisions you make. So there will be some changes potentially, some of these policies, but they will be driven by a decision that you guys make as a collective.
Are these policies externally audited or are they just audited through the council?
They're a process that need to be followed through the Act says what must be adopted with a long-term plan. And there's also supplementary policies which assist the application of running council. It actually gets to that level. We actually use them. We refer to them weekly. That's something that's very important to us. So in terms of the staff. But the audit of them, they are reviewed and checked for completeness, but they're also looked, just as our CEO has told us, there's a real look from the auditor's perspective. They've talked to us a few times about making sure that our financial strategy aligns to our infrastructure strategy and making sure that's clear. So they will look at those and they may raise issues if they don't see. Very much you've got a lot of freedom within them. There's certain banking covenants that are required under, say, treasury management. There might be some other legislation they need to include, but essentially you've got quite a lot of freedom to set your own boundaries and then hold us to account to make sure that we're doing everything you've asked us to do.
Thank you. Joe.
I guess it's you as staff that could deal with and see where the policies inhibit what us or you want to do or the community have asked you to do. Are there particular things that have arisen over the last 3 years that you feel that needs revision of the policies?
That's a really good question. I think the key thing that we've identified collectively as a group, and we have made overt resolutions as a council on, has been that debt limit, where we had the 25 net debt and above that for the second plan, and we actually clearly resolved that would be required. So I think it's that's one of the main areas that's been a concern. In terms of applying the policies we've got, I think they're generally fit for purpose and they give good guidance for us to operate within. There's nothing I can think of that's really blinding, every day it's a concern, but you might
I think the two areas that we obviously have an issue with under our treasury policy with how much we can hold the building society type thing, so EBS gives that, but that's been well documented and understood. And then the second one is this discussion about whether Buller needs to go and be a guarantor of the LGFA, which opens up big borrowings for us. If we're not a water entity, that creates a question whether we need to go that far. So we were getting ready some papers to talk about that with the council. So we just haven't gone back and reviewed that issue yet. So they're probably the three areas where we're looked at. There's a few other matters now, as we've referred to our council about difficulty to pay. And often when you are challenged about those sort of things in a business, your eyes and focus on the financials actually needs to be even greater. Because slippage in, say, payment accounts, or how we pay accounts, or when we spend, just needs actually a bit more focus than when you are the luxury of more options in your income sources or your ability to sort of move with expenditure. So that's an area management wise we'll be looking at, and Lynn and I will be able to sort of start sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks. A bit of a slip down and just go through and run down on that policies as well. So that we use to
Thanks. Joe.
I was just wondering the rates remission policy, where there's just a couple of little items that need discussing. I think there's still one around natural disaster, but realistically, are we in a position with natural disaster of actually doing remission? So, and there was another one around who could apply for the 50% rate. The heading implies it's community, but under the wording, it's bonus for cultural and other things. So just bearing in mind where should the community hub go, will that be applicable to the 50% emission? If the community well-being thing. And when we queried about that, there was a thing to say it doesn't fit within our policy. So I read it does, but it's at the discretion of the manager of corporate services. So just some clarity about their policy and what it allows or doesn't allow.
Thanks, Joe. And Liz?
With the MBS breaching that policy, what is the rationale behind that? Just like as a personal banker, MBS offers pretty poor rates compared to other banks, and like, so are their rates as competitive as the other banks we invest in? And then what's the rationale between breaching that policy with them?
Yeah, so just in general terms, so the four main trading banks have are seen as much better to put your cash in because the chance of them in some returns going.
Backed up by the government.
Correct. But there's some limits on that, yeah, so just be careful with that. But when you get down to the lower, to what they call the next tier banks, where building societies sit, their risk of you investing in long-term deposit does have a greater concern of being repaid. And I'll go back to, I don't drag this on, but this is just puts in perspective. So 15 years ago, there was a bit of a collapse in some of the, what they call, when I say buildings, like the next tier of tier vendors. We put money into, say, car loans and that type of things. People didn't quite appreciate that there was a greater risk of those because of the type of loans they were in, and the interest rate being paid didn't really reflect that risk. So if you're getting, say, a bank deposit paying 4% and another one still sort of saying it's paying 6%, that's reflecting the chance of getting that 6% of your interest rate is probably the greater risk than getting a bank at 4%. So, you know, there isn't too much between, say, the building societies and the main trading vendors, but there is a difference. And so that's what that means. So therefore, when we say we want to limit to that 10%, we're not unique in that in terms of local government. It's just our risk appetite for that type of deposit is less than putting it with the four main trading banks.
So generally speaking, you should be getting a better return from.
That's right, and there's a little bit of a margin in there, which is probably appropriate, whether it's enough, and that's why you have the 10%.
Thank you. Anyone else with any more questions regarding policies? No? Thanks, Tom.
And last but not least for this afternoon, similar situation in terms of our key performance indicators. Like I said, they are live documents. We can actually quite a few updates since we've already sent them out, and they will be updated reflectively. But is there any questions or any of those that you looked at that you would like to see changed, or anything you would like to see added in? Like I say, no decisions are etc. being made today, but just if there's anything you can think of, you can look at changing.
So there was a few things I thought needed update. One talked about the governance, and I talked about having a meeting a year in Carriman and Region. I think it was part of that, perhaps their governance discussion, but whether it's feasible given that we live stream now. But I thought that needs to be either applied or changed.
Actually, good question, and that's why we sort of highlighted it in there as it's something for you guys to consider. I don't think any of the last 3 years, I don't think we've managed to do that, and COVID was certainly to blame for some of that. I like the idea in principle. We do now live stream all of that, but it is nice to be able to touch face to face. So be interested in your views around the table as to if you'd like to consider reaching out to our different communities and holding meetings there.
I'm all for that. Totally. Can we live stream Ansley from, or Region, or obviously do already as part of the
We are now.
Can we do that?
We've not got any remote or video equipment to take with us at the moment, but we are looking at quotes as to what that would cost, and so that might be an option for us.
I would like to see some definitive figures on time and cost of taking staff, etc., out to the regions for what we really get, because you don't get a lot of input. Probably Karamea is one of the better places that you get people turn up, but usually it's a bitch session and it doesn't really achieve one heck of a lot, and it means that staff traipse out there, and yeah, I'm not very in favour of it, because it's just sort of what I see is a lot of time and really wasted valuable staff time.
Linda, have you got a viewpoint on this? I'm sure you will have.
Well, I think the more times you actually reach out and actually people have a chance to actually engage in our meetings and that. For instance, last night at our community board, we had, maybe 10, 12 members of the public. Our public forum lasted for an hour. So I think the more times that the council can go into these areas, the more engaged the community feels and has an opportunity to engage. I think you've got to look at the bigger picture, and there's no reason why you couldn't live stream the meetings from Reefton. We could use, I know there's not the digital capability at the moment at the Women's Institute, but there's no reason why we couldn't move back to the St John's room for that meeting.
Thanks, Linda. Any other suggestions? I hadn't thought about that, but obviously if you were moving meetings around the place, to me that means six council staff, 7 council, well, what have we got, 6 council staff are also transporting, unless it becomes a remote council exercise. And if it's all going to become remote, then I don't see the benefit in that. You're not even at a council meeting. I think it feels better having people around the table, in my opinion. Tony.
Sorry, sticking on that point, it's just that, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and that does happen, because I've seen it, as you were saying, but you've got to smash through those barriers and change culture to improve things, and you can't just keep on saying that's going to happen. I suppose it's like you putting your best foot forward and really making the effort, and that sort of promotes change. And
I guess the whole point of what I brought it up was I just wanted to make sure the KPIs had meaning and they were actually things that we were going to achieve.
Yeah.
That was just one example.
No, yeah, that's right. There's quite a lot of reading in that one, I have to say. Are there any more points to raise around those KPIs? They were quite extensive. No? And John, carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's come to pretty much the end of this afternoon. What I wanted to discuss was potentially the future considerations. I think Steve alluded to what his staff what we're certainly planning on doing in the next couple of weeks, whether that be an extraordinary council meeting at the start of March, or if we delays that paper back in terms of the big discussion point today. I think it's been a very good conversation we've had today. I think it's been a really good debate. So yeah, that's the next steps for us, is obviously to establish some of the ROI situation. Hopefully the next week or so we'll have some further information from central government in terms of the legislation repeal, and then we will come back to the council at the start of March with the paper for the next steps. Any questions?
Any last words from council?
Sounds a bit morbid.
Sorry, Mr. Phil. Anyone? No, it seems like there's no more questions. So, have you got a question, Steve or John?
Yeah, so what will happen is now we're going to move into public excluded, and that's for the privacy of the match.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of minutes to allow them to press the buttons. So if you need to use your